Hey guys, Tyler here. The Q are one of the most powerful species in the Star Trek universe. First introduced in the Next Generation pilot Encounter at Farpoint, the Q possess seemingly godlike powers. Q have been shown manipulating the laws of time and space, creating grand illusions that are indistinguishable from reality, and testing the limits of human creativity and human patience. The Q hail from a dimension known as the Q Continuum, but what are their true origins? Did they evolve from a familiar humanoid form like so many other aliens in Star Trek? How do their near-omnipotent abilities actually work, and what are their limits? And finally, what are the Q's true plans for humanity? Those are all questions I intend to answer in today's video, so buckle up. We're talking about the Q. Before we take a deep dive into the Q's origins and history, a quick overview of their abilities can provide some context. Normally, this is where I'd offer a laundry list of what makes the Q unique, and there's a lot that does, but the truth is the full scope of their powers is not really known. What the Q claim that they are includes the following: that they are omnipotent, omniscient, and immortal, among other things. No doubt, we see demonstrations of their sheer cosmic power on multiple occasions. They can traverse vast distances of space and time, including visiting realms outside the observable universe. They can alter physical constants, change the orbits of planets and moons, create and destroy matter on a whim, and more. Delancey's Q further states in the episode Deja Q that his species does not experience claustrophobia, being too hot or too cold, growing feeble with age, losing their hair, catching disease, being ticklish, sneezing, having an itch, a pimple, bad breath, having to bathe, having to sleep, eat, or become seriously injured. Now, much of this is probably true, but not all of it is. Indeed, the Q known as Quinn, a dissident in the Continuum, claims that his people are not truly omnipotent. We see this demonstrated in the Voyager episode Death Wish, in which Quinn, who has grown bored with being immortal, tries to commit suicide, but he can't do this in his natural form, so he must ingest poison as a humanoid so he can finally die. This raises lots of other questions about what the Q can't do. Indeed, I haven't really talked much yet about their knowledge of the future. While I think that the Q are aware of various possible futures, much like the sphere builders from Star Trek Enterprise, I think it's fair to say that they don't know exactly how things are going to play out, not only inside their continuum, but in the prime timeline itself. They still perceive time linearly, and just as their inability to commit suicide means they're not truly omnipotent, their ability to be surprised means they're not truly omniscient either. There are at least two major examples of this. One is when Q is surprised that the USS Voyager has become stranded in the Delta Quadrant. He says that Starfleet was not supposed to visit this region of space for another century. Another is when members of the Q Continuum express that they don't know what would happen if one of their own were to die, that it could cause chaos in the Continuum. And in fact, this is actually what happens after Quinn commits suicide. The Continuum descends into a destructive civil war. But how is it that they got to be this powerful in the first place? In canon, it's not entirely clear when the Q actually came into existence, particularly when their supposed corporeal ancestors first evolved. It's believed that they may have originated as humanoids, not unlike many of the other intelligent species in the galaxy, who arose from a genetic code seeded by ancient humanoids 4.5 billion years ago. Quinn states this is how his species began, that is, at least like humanoids, while Delancey's Q states that the Q have always existed. But given the nature of their ability to exist across time and space, this isn't necessarily contradictory. Here's why. You see, the Q's corporeal ancestors, if they did in fact have them, could have evolved at any point in the history of the universe, be it billions of years in the past or even trillions of years in the future. But once they became advanced enough to transcend the normal bounds of space-time, inhabiting an alternate plane that became the continuum. They would have been able to access any point in time since they shed this limitation. This is how Q and female Q would have been able to begin their romantic relationship 4 billion years ago.
I was good, wasn't I?
And how they could have had some presence dating back all the way to the Big Bang, possibly before. The Q predate their ancestors from our perspective, but not necessarily from theirs. But what evolutionary path could have taken the Q from being material life forms to becoming extra-dimensional? Well, that's also quite hard to say, but there are a number of conclusions that we can draw from their most apparent attributes. Many note that the Q fit the description of a Type 5 civilization on the Kardashev scale. What is the Kardashev scale, you ask? Well, it's a method of measuring a civilization's technological level based on how much energy they can harness at different scales. Developed by Soviet astronomer Nikolai Kardashev, is it Kardashev? How do you pronounce it?
Kardashev scale.
Kardashev. The original scale has 3 levels: Type 1, Type 2, and Type 3. A Type 1 civilization can harness the entire energy output of their home planet. A Type 2 civilization can harness the entire energy available from their star system. And a Type 3 civilization can harness the entire energy output of their home galaxy. Humanity is currently more of a Type 0 civilization, because of course we are, since we've only been able to use and store a fraction of our planet's geothermal energy. But in Star Trek, the Federation would be more like a Type 2.5, since their civilization can use and control the total energy output of a collection of star systems. This also describes other major powers in Star Trek, like the Klingons, the Romulans, the Dominion, the Borg, etc. But the Q are way beyond Type 3. They may be Type 4 or Type 5. Michio Kaku has theorized that the former label, Type 4, could describe civilizations that are capable of harnessing extragalactic sources of energy, like dark energy. Type 4 would control the entire universe, while Type 5 could control a collection of universes. While it's not clear how much domain the Q have over the multiverse, what is clear is that they can manipulate the nature of at least one observable universe, the prime timeline. Thus, as social scientist Zoltan Galantai has written, such a civilization would not be detectable using normal methods, as their activities would be indistinguishable from the everyday workings of nature. Of course, it should be noted that many consider the Kardashev scale to be somewhat archaic, given its focus on energy production rather than the manipulation of increasingly smaller quanta of reality. This is more in line with what we know about the Q, that they're capable of creating and destroying matter and ripping holes in the fabric of space-time itself. The energy issue is why cosmologist John D. Barrow has proposed an alternative scale that extends downward from Type 1- to Type Omega-. Type 1- can work with macro-scale objects, like building structures. Type 2- can alter living beings' genetic code. Type 3- can make or break molecular bonds. Type 4- can harness atoms to create nanotechnologies and artificial life. Type 5- can manipulate the atomic nucleus. Type 6- can employ the most elementary particles to create organized complexity. And finally, Type Omega- can change the basic structure of space and time. Under this classification, humanity is approaching Type 4- status, while the Q can be argued to rather neatly fit into the Type Omega- status. Much like other non-corporeal species, such as the Organians and the Metrons, and maybe even the Prophets, one possible evolutionary path for the Q may have been advancing from an industrial or information society to conducting engineering on increasingly smaller scales of the universe. Eventually, after thousands, millions, or even billions of years, the Q would have figured out a way to manipulate the wave functions of the atoms in their own bodies, possibly disconnecting their consciousness in the process, in order to ascend to a new plane of reality, what would become the Q Continuum. Here they would take a form that is incomprehensible to three-dimensional brains, and they would begin to experience billions of years of history and culture, dating back again all the way to the Big Bang. After a while, though, they would create a stagnant culture where everything interesting that could be said and done has been said and done. That is, until Quinn disrupts things with his whole "I don't want to live forever anymore" thing. Humanity has always been a curiosity for at least one Q. Q. John Delancey's Q. Making official first contact with the Federation in 2364, he proceeds to put humanity on trial for being a grievously savage child race, in his words. He visits the Enterprise D a total of 7 times. During one of these visits in 2365, he prematurely introduces Starfleet to the Borg. This encounter occurs, in the words of Guinan, much sooner than it should have. This means that Q has invariably altered the fate of the Prime timeline. As Picard notes at the end of the episode Q Who, however, this may have been an example of Q doing the right thing for the wrong reasons, giving Starfleet a kick in their complacency and helping them better prepare for what would lay ahead. Indeed, the Q and humanity have an intricately woven relationship that begins to manifest around the mid to late 24th century. The Q Civil War sparked by Quinn's death is naturally fought between two sides: conservatives, who fear the influence that human compassion and curiosity has had on the Q's timeless, stable, and apathetic society, and liberals, who seek to revitalize their society by continuing contact with other species. While many Q view humans and other corporeal life forms as being next to non-entities, the way a person might look at an amoeba, other Q see the potential in humanity. Indeed, various Q have commented on how one day humans might become like them. This has led some fans to theorize that the Q are future humans, a strong claim to be sure, and one that is not really entertained in any licensed media. For one thing, the fact that Q can not only alter the timeline without grave concern, but also be surprised at many human actions, indicates to me, at least, that the Q and humans have always been separate species. In this way, humanity is a curiosity for them, not because they're the Q's actual ancestors, but because they see humanity's potential to one day rival their own power. How long will it take humanity to reach this level of development? Well, there's really no way to predict that, but as Q has said on multiple occasions, the trial never ends. Thank you all so much for watching this video. The Q are obviously a topic I've been wanting to tackle for a long time, and of course this is only a fraction of the information we know about them, so you may see more about them on this channel in the future. In the meantime, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a thumbs up down below and don't forget to share it. That stuff really helps me out. If you haven't subscribed yet, be sure to do that as well so you won't miss future uploads, and click the bell icon to receive all notifications. If you think I deserve it and you want to support the channel even further, becoming a patron or a member is a great way to do so. Links to those, as well as my social media and merch store, are in the description. That's all I have for this week. Live long and prosper.